Here is Operational Excellence expert Andrew Miller speaking to a group of executives and MBA students at the Rotman School of Management about the concepts from his new book.
To interact. I'm glad to be here this morning. So I want to start off by asking if anyone's been to the Apple Store lately. Just put up your hand if you've been to the Apple Store lately. Okay, so most people here. So I was there a few months ago. I had to buy a new laptop. I walked in. It's pretty, obviously, vast store. Pretty impressive architecturally. But you walk in and you're greeted immediately. Somebody says, "Hi, how are you? What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for a laptop." "Okay, John over here is going to help you." So you walk in, you're immediately greeted, you're immediately partnered up with a sales rep who's going to help you with what you need. They showed me the different sizes, the different screens, the different whatever it might be. I pretty much knew what I wanted. So as I'm standing there, we're talking about the different sizes. Finally, I say, I want this one. They pull out an iPhone. Within about 30 seconds, they've put your order into the system. They ask you to pay right on the spot. You don't have to worry about lining up in the cashier anymore. As I'm talking to them about future plans and, do you want Apple Care or extended warranty, any of that stuff, about 60 seconds later, my computer just shows up. I'm standing there. We're talking. Payment's gone through. Somebody comes out with a bag and hands me my computer. And all I'm thinking to myself is, that's very impressive. I'm here for less than 10 minutes. I've been paid. They've paid. I've got my stuff. I've bought whatever I need to buy in terms of accessories, warranties, Apple Care, training, and I'm out the door in 10 minutes or less. To me, that's operational excellence. That's what it really means to be operational excellence. So I'm not going to say I giggle, but I'm always curious when, especially retail companies say, what's the future of retail in terms of our customers and our strategies? And I think it's right in front of us. I think Apple is a great example of what the future of operational excellence looks like, because they've thrown away a lot of the common models for retail, just to focus on retail for 1 second, to say, why is that operationally excellent? Because you're in and out in 10 minutes to buy a fairly high-end purchase that can be a very complicated purchase. It can be a very nerve-wracking purchase if you don't know what you're looking for. But they make you feel comfortable. They greet you at the door. They partner you up with somebody right away who knows exactly what you're looking for. They usher you around the store, showing you exactly where everything is and what you need. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? They've thrown away the old model of I've got to stand in line to pay for my stuff, because they pull out their iPhone and you pay right there. Credit card, whatever you want to pay. And it's tied to their back system so that while they're talking, while they're processing the payment, somebody else in the back room is getting your stuff, preparing it, and giving it to you. So you don't have to wait for somebody to go back, pull it off a shelf while you're sort of standing there going, what's next? Where'd they go? They disappeared. That's operational excellence. The key in my book, which if I were to sum it up in one line, is operational excellence is not a methodology, it's a mindset. It's a way that organizations think in terms of how do we improve the way that we operate as an organization? Today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. It's a mindset that people have, that they come to work every day saying, how can I make this place better? How can I make this place better for myself, for my fellow employees, for my customers, for my suppliers, for our business partners, for my bosses? How can we do things even just a little bit better? It doesn't have to be disruptive. Sometimes it can be, but it doesn't have to be. But it's about making progress towards excellence, however a specific organization defines excellence. So I think that there's 4 or 5 key levers that organizations can pull in order to improve profitability and performance. And the main reason I wrote this book, which I'll get into in a minute, which is why do I think operational excellence needs redefining. But operational excellence is important, but it's got to be tied to something. So operational excellence in and of itself, what does that really mean? You've got to tie it to profitability. You've got to tie it to performance. We're not going to go through all these initiatives just for the sake of doing it. We've got to get some kind of a result. So I just want to talk briefly about 4 key levers that organizations can pull. And these are all covered in the book, but these are really the 4 ones that I see where the most successful organizations have mastered the ability to pull these. The first is innovation. Now, innovation is a big word. I recognize that. So the way I define innovation in terms of operational excellence is the adoption and application of new ideas and best practices. So it's not necessarily we've created something brand new and disruptive that's a technology or a medical device or something like that. It's about how do you adopt best practices? How do you best apply them across your organization to get to maximize your results? And those results might be profitability. It might be performance. It might be employee retention. Every organization is going to define that a little differently. But to me, innovation is about how do you adopt and apply best practices and new ideas to maximize those results for your organization. You can call that applied wisdom. That's what I call it in the book, is applied wisdom. How do you take the internal wisdom in your organization and apply it across the entire organization to maximize the benefit? The second lever is collaboration. Again, another big word in terms of the definition that we can use. The way I talk about collaboration is a means to an end. But you've got to determine what that end is. So you always have to ask yourself as an organization, why collaborate? Because again, if we collaborate just for the sake of collaboration, what are we really trying to achieve? You've got to know what you want to achieve by collaboration. Can we do something faster, cheaper, better if we look and collaborate internally or externally? But if you can't, why would you collaborate? Why would you make things slower? Why bring more people into the mix if you're not going to be able to improve the result? So you've got to look at saying, what's the improved result we're trying to achieve? And can we use collaboration to speed it up, to do it better, to do it faster, to do it more cheaply, to provide more value to the customer? Again, collaboration as a means to an end. The next concept, the next lever is speed. Now, I'm going to say something that may sound counterintuitive, but sometimes you actually need to slow down in order to get the best results. And I think a lot of organizations, when they hear speed, they focus on, we've got to put the pedal to the metal. We've got to go as fast as we possibly can. And I'm a big proponent of that in many cases. But the most successful organizations also know when they need to slow down. So they've got indicators in place that allow them to determine when should we speed up, when should we slow down in order to maximize our results. And the fourth and final lever I want to talk about is performance. And again, when I talk about performance, it's about how do you identify opportunities in your organization in areas that you don't normally look. So if you think of the analogy of, you're wearing a miner's hat and you've got the light on. Oh, the microphone just started working apparently when I get closer. I'll use this hand. You got the miner's hat, you got the light on, you're shining that light in the deep, dark corners of your organization. Those are the areas where there's a tremendous amount of opportunity because most companies don't look there. So instead of shying away from those corners and saying, well, that's a compliance department, or that's something that we'll just leave over there. The example, I do a lot of work in healthcare. So a lot of my hospital clients literally have their procurement departments in the basement, next to the morgue in many cases. So think about that if you're another department saying, we need to go talk to procurement. Well, let's have them come to us because they're in the basement next to the morgue. That's an area of an organization that you don't often want to look at because it's sort of forgotten. It's down. It's in the basement. And one of the things I've encouraged my clients to do is literally to take procurement out of the basement, literally and figuratively, meaning move them out of there, but also look at them as a potential revenue generator for your organization. Think about things a little bit differently. It's not just about compliance. So it's about shining that light on those deep, dark corners of the organization where you can find tremendous opportunity. And then, of course, it's about taking advantage of that opportunity. So once we've identified it, how do we take advantage of it? And that goes back to the first lever, which I talked about, innovation. Once we've identified things that we can do, how do we best implement them, leverage them, integrate them, and make sure that we broaden the impact as much as possible? So why does operational excellence need redefining? It wasn't just because I felt like writing a book. It was because I was looking at the way that we define operational excellence, the way that we think about operational excellence. And operational excellence really started in the manufacturing space. So if you go back 30 plus years, for those of you who may be familiar with, the Toyota production system, concepts like Lean, Six Sigma, that's really where operational excellence, or at least the concept, of operational excellence started, which is, how do we standardize processes? How do we eliminate waste? Those kinds of things. I think the problem we have now is we still think, in many cases, that way about operational excellence. So it's 30, it's 40 years later. We've got lots of organizations who don't manufacture anything, who are trying to pull these concepts and methodologies out from the manufacturing world and apply them to people, to retail, to services. And the concept is a good one. Obviously, you want to try and apply what's worked elsewhere to your own organization. But the problem is, when you focus on methodologies, a lot of them focus on problem resolution. So they work great if you say, I've got a problem, I need to fix it. I've got to eliminate waste. I've got to remove a couple of steps. But what they don't do is they don't allow you to think differently. So you've got a problem. You were here, your performance was here, you had a problem, it got down to here. You implement some kind of methodology that restores you back to past performance. But if you look at a lot of the most successful organizations now, they're not satisfied with restoring past performance. They want to blow performance out of the water. They want to disrupt industries. They want to create levels of success that no one's ever seen before. So the old way of thinking about operational excellence is about problem resolution, issue resolution, restoring past performance. The reason I felt it needed to be redefined is we need to start thinking about growth and innovation, not cost-cutting and problem resolution. It's a very different mindset that organizations have when you say, we're going to implement some kind of methodology to try and fix our problems, versus we don't even know what the problems are. We're going to create a brand new industry, a brand new product. We're going to create a need for a customer. So it's very different in saying we're going to solve a problem versus we're going to create a need, right? So that's the mindset difference that I really want to focus on. And the reason I felt like redefining operational excellence was the right time to do it. Because if I think of some of those methodologies, and I'll just mention Lean and Six Sigma, Total Quality Management, some of these ones that came out of the manufacturing world in the 80s and are now being applied to service organizations, to healthcare organizations, to retail organizations. And from my experience, my clients, is to varying degrees of success, but the level of success is not sustainable and it's not very high. So they might get some short-term results, but those results aren't sustainable. And I think there's a couple of reasons why there's limitations in these methodologies, and which is why the focus has to be on the mindset of excellence, not the methodology. And like I said earlier, they focus on problem resolution, not growth or innovation. So if you think of something like the iPod, or if you think of a company like Amazon, or a few years ago, if you think of, and it's funny that Dell is here, but you think about how Dell changed the way we buy computers a few years ago in actually allowing you to customize your own computer online. So if you think of those three quick examples, if you implemented a methodology in your organization, none of those three things would exist right now. If Apple had said, we've got to lean this process, or we're going to implement Six Sigma to try and find a new product, they never would have developed the iPod. The iPod was the creation of a need. Their customers weren't going and saying, boy, would I love to have a little device that holds 1,000 songs that I could slip into my pocket. That was a need that was created by Apple. A methodology wouldn't have created that need. Dell never would have created online customization for personal computers by resolving a problem or trying to find a need. They created that need. They said, how can we differentiate ourselves in a market where everybody's doing the same thing around personal computers? Well, what if we allowed people to customize it and made it easy? And our supply chain allowed us to get it there very quickly. So I could order it, I could customize it, and I could have it there within a week. Again, disruptive innovation wouldn't have existed if we were looking at what's the problem that we need to solve. And Amazon as a company wouldn't have existed if they were looking at what's the problem within the organization we need to solve. We're going to create a brand new type of company that's just going to be able to deliver anything within 24 hours. Doesn't matter what you sell. We're just going to build a huge base of customers, and we're going to provide them anything, and we're going to get excellent at warehousing and supply chain and distribution, and we're going to build the biggest, baddest e-commerce site ever. And we're just going to draw millions and millions and millions of people because we're going to sell everything and we're going to get it to them in 24 hours. Right? Those kinds of things don't happen when you sit down to say, let's implement Lean, let's implement Six Sigma, let's figure out what the problem is here. That happens when you have a mindset of, we're going to create something brand new, something innovative, and we're going to create a market for that. The second reason is as I mentioned, the results are often short-term. So I see a lot of clients that spend a lot of time getting people trained on various methodologies, all the various different color belts and things like that. And they get some short-term results. Yes, we were able to save some money here. Yes, this process goes a little quicker there. But the results aren't sustainable because eventually people figure out how to game the system, how to go back to what they were doing before, how to circumvent the new process they're supposed to follow. Because a lot of times we're not getting the support and the buy-in. So we were just having a quick discussion before about the support and buy-in for change. If you want to ever have sustainable change, the people who are most impacted have to be involved in the change. So if you're not getting those people involved, they don't buy into the changes that are being made. They'll do them for a little while because somebody's telling them to. And for the first 2 or 3 months, their boss is looking over their shoulder, making sure they're doing all the right things. But eventually the boss stops looking over the shoulder. The metrics change. People move on to the next cool thing. And people just go back to doing what they were doing before. With a lot of these methodologies, there's no sustainable benefit that happens. It also requires a great deal of time and effort. So whether it's training, whether it's implementation, I think about how much time organizations spend going through all of the massive training that's required for all of their people. But then at the end of the day, it's only 2 or 3 people in the organization that are actually experts in it. So instead of having the entire organization think differently, what we're saying is, well, if 2 or 3 people in the organization think differently, they're going to be able to affect this massive change that we're looking for. And that doesn't happen. It's not a sustainable way to change the way an organization operates. If you want to change the way your organization operates, everybody has to think differently. Doesn't mean they all have to go through special training. Doesn't mean they all have to get certain designations. But it means that they have to show up saying, what direction is my organization trying to go? How can I best help us get there? Right? And that takes away the concern that people have saying, well, I don't have an ability to implement anything that's going to get us where we need to be. I don't have the ability to tell my boss or other departments to do what I think is the right thing to do. It takes away that fear. And it says, what can I do in my own circle of influence to make this place better? And obviously part of that is the organization has to empower the people to be able to do that. Doesn't mean you can go out and make $1 million investment without getting the appropriate approvals. But what it does mean is if you see that if I move this machine from here to over here, and that's going to help improve things, then I've got the empowerment to do that. I've got the ability to do that. There's a formal way that we can look at ideas, best practices, and figure out how can we broaden the impact of those best practices. The other limitation is a lot of these methodologies focus on specific events. So we're going to all get together and we're going to talk about a specific process or a specific event, and we're going to try and fix that. It doesn't talk about the organization as a whole. Obviously, we try and bring in all the right people, but we're not always going to hit everyone that's impacted. So it's about a specific, unique event, not necessarily ongoing improvements. It's about we're going to make these changes. It's not about, okay, we're going to make these, we're going to see how they work, and then we're going to continuously look at how do we improve that process, that initiative, that strategy. And I think maybe the most important and final point I want to make about methodologies in general is they don't encourage any risk taking. They encourage, and they don't encourage long-term value. They focus on short-term value. They focus on what I'll say is a low level of risk tolerance, right? You're not going to come up with much disruptive, new, innovative stuff in looking at a specific issue, problem, initiative, strategy, and saying, how do we make this particular thing a little bit better? You've got to look at the broader picture and start with what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And that's where I think the mindset of operational excellence really shifts, is when you start with what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And that may not necessarily be at the CEO level saying, here's our corporate strategy. You can look at it at every level of the organization to say, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? Now, the key is that that outcome aligns with the direction the organization wants to go. So I say we talk about implementation and execution a lot. Those are words that are thrown around a lot, but for good reason, because I think the difference between the most successful organizations and those that aren't the most successful is how they execute and how they implement. But the key in those two is that the tactics that are being employed align directly with the direction that the corporation is going. So if you think of, for those of you that may have been to a wedding and seen those champagne pyramids, where you've got the triangle pyramid of glasses, somebody pours champagne on the top glass, it cascades its way all the way down to all the bottom glasses. So by the end, all the glasses are filled all the way up. If you haven't seen it, it's a pretty impressive sight. But I use that analogy to talk about strategy execution. And that's the way implementation and execution should happen in an organization, is that there's a direction the organization wants to go, which is that top class. But the strategy and the tactics have to cascade their way down. And everything is interrelated. So everybody at every level of the organization not only is clear on the direction the organization is going, but more importantly, or equally importantly, they understand their role in helping the organization get there. So if the organization says, we want to be number one in our market, well, that's a big, broad goal. That's great. That's what the senior leadership team needs to be focused on. But if I'm 4 levels below the senior leadership team, that's something that doesn't, I mean, it's great to say I work for a company that wants to be number one in the market. But how does that affect my behavior on a day-to-day basis? What can I do, or what's expected of me to help the organization become number one in the market? Because if I'm not a salesperson, well, I can't affect the top line, right? So that's the cascade part that's so important, is that everybody across the organization understands what their role is in helping the company progress to that goal of being number one in the market. So that's where you've got to have strong people all the way through and leaders all the way through to understand exactly what their roles are. Organizations don't thrive with methodologies. They thrive with a common mindset and a willingness to change behaviors when it's appropriate. They thrive with a mindset of, this is how we're going to improve. This is how I can help the organization improve. It doesn't have to improve the entire organization. This is the sphere of influence I have. This is how I can help. This is what I can do to help progress. So again, going back to why redefine operational excellence, it's been an interesting progression I've seen over the last 25 or 30 years, because it really, like I said, started with logistics and manufacturing, and then we started calling that supply chain and supply chain management. Now we're started to shift it a little broader, and we're calling it operational excellence. So we've shifted the terms that we use, even though you could, in many cases, argue that everything underneath those umbrellas has pretty much stayed the same. So when I talk to people who are implementing operational excellence initiatives, a lot of it has to do with still the supply chain stuff. It doesn't necessarily impact customers. It doesn't always impact frontline employees. So a lot of it still is focused on the operational, I'll call it back end for lack of a better term. The mindset change that has to happen is we have to shift to start thinking of the front lines more when we talk about operational excellence. Because especially for any organization that has customers, patients, members, whatever you want to talk about your frontline people that sort of keep your lights on by paying, it's the frontline people in your organization who interact with those people. So going back to the retail story about the store, right? I'm never going to meet Tim Cook. Well, maybe I will, but odds are I'm probably not. But my interaction with Apple is going to be the frontline people at the Apple store. So they're representative of whatever Tim Cook and the Apple executive team are trying to do. So regardless of what's written in the papers, regardless of what happens with their stock price, regardless of what happens with new product innovations that come out, if their frontline people aren't effective, I may not go there again, right? So that's where you have to think of that mindset to say, is all of this stuff that we're trying to accomplish, this excellence, this perfection, this improvement, this innovation, is that making its way to our front lines? Are our frontline people representing us in that way? I've seen a lot of organizations actually starting to hire fairly senior positions around operational excellence, which I think is a good thing. But as I said, a lot of that focus is still on these various methodologies. So all we've really done is we've taken the name of a methodology, or we've taken a specific approach, and we've now just created a role for it. So it's Director of Operational Excellence, VP of Operational Excellence. But the focus is still on, a lot of times, problem resolution. And I think the focus needs to be more on, at a minimum, how do we identify and adopt and apply our own internal best practices. That to me is the minimum of a director or VP of operational excellence, what they should be focused on. Because I've seen very few organizations that are good at identifying, adopting, applying, maximizing benefit of their own internal best practices. Because the default is, well, let's look at what other people are doing outside and let's try and replicate it. But the fact is it's much easier to get sustainable results when you implement your own internal best practices than if you look outside. Doesn't mean you shouldn't look outside, but too many organizations start with, let's see what's going on outside our industry, outside our own company. And I always tell my clients, let's start with what you're doing well within your own company, because that's easier to replicate, it's easier to implement, it's easier to get short-term results that are more sustainable. So it's about how you talk about success and how you talk about excellence. What do I mean by that practically? Because, we've been fairly conceptual now. So what I want to do is I want to give you 5 examples of how, and a lot of these are from the book, how to think a little bit differently when it comes to operational excellence. So the first is customer satisfaction. I love customer satisfaction because at the end of the day, for me, I'm not sure really what customer satisfaction actually tells us. So I say, instead of customer satisfaction, we need to be focused on customer retention. Because who cares if your customers are satisfied and happy if they don't come back? I mean, it sounds very capitalistic, but I'm okay with that because that's the society we live in. So the reality is, what good is customer satisfaction if people buy one thing from us and never buy anything else? What good is customer satisfaction if people buy something and don't tell other people about our organization to help attract new customers? So you get these surveys that say, we've got a 98 satisfaction rate, and that's fine. I mean, that's a great internal thing to be able to say our customers are happy. But what I'm more interested in, and what, to me, the shift in when you're thinking about operational excellence and the mindset is, how many of those customers are buying more stuff from us? How many of those customers are referring other potential customers to us? That's more the metric that I'm interested in terms of satisfaction. Are they satisfied enough that they come back? Are they satisfied enough that they're sending other people our way? So you've got to understand the difference between those two and put strategies in place to focus on those customers that you want to retain, that you want to turn into evangelists, ambassadors, whatever word you want to use, that are actually going to help you grow your business. So just give you a quick example of that. I'm working with a client right now who the focus right now is determining their strengths and their value. Because they were very fortunate to have a really good run with customers where they kept calling them. They didn't have to really do any overt business development. Their phone just kept ringing off the hook, which is obviously a great position to be in until the phone stops ringing. So they had spent 3 or 4 years running at very high profitability, getting customers calling them all the time. And about a year ago, the phone stopped ringing. So for about 6 months, they didn't do anything about it because they said, well, we've still got all the customers that we're still working with. But they had no business development strategy. So that's when they called me and they said, we've had a dry 6 months. We haven't brought in any new customers. We've had 5 years where customers called us nonstop. We don't really know we don't know how to develop new business. We've never had to. Right? So the focus was, and they had very satisfied customers. All their customers were happy. It just happened to be the 3 or 4 key customers they had just decided at that point they weren't going to renew the service, and no new customers were calling. So again, focusing on customer retention, we implemented a couple of different strategies on how do we try and bring new ideas to our existing customers because they like us, they know us, they understand us. We've worked with them in the past, we've brought them lots of value in the past, and we've got some really great ideas that we've just never told them about because we were so comfortable getting phone calls from new customers. So part 1 of the strategy, go to your existing customers with a whole bunch of new value. Part 2 of the strategy was, so that's the retention aspect. Part 2 is, what value can we bring to the market? So what was valuable about our relationships with our current customers that we can now bring to new customers? So that's the business development piece. So within 6 months, again, their business doubled because now they had focused strategies on who's the ideal customer that we want to retain, who's the ideal customer we want to acquire. and we implement specific strategies on how to do that. The second sort of mind shift or word change I want to talk about is, instead of talking about eliminating waste, we have to talk about driving innovation. It's a very different mindset when you say we're eliminating waste. Okay, so we're going to do things more efficiently, as opposed to driving innovation, which means we're going to do things differently. We don't know what that's going to be, but eliminating waste means I'm going to take this 10-step process and I'm going to turn it into 5 steps. Driving innovation means take this 10-step process, I'm going to throw it out the door, I'm going to look at what's the outcome I want to achieve, and I'm going to figure out the best, fastest, most effective way to achieve that outcome. It might be a step, it might be 3, it might be a completely different way of doing it. But that's the difference to me between eliminating waste and driving innovation. And innovation, again, is a very broadly defined word. But I think it's important to understand what's a mindset of innovation. How do you implement a mindset of innovation within your organization? And so I held a small breakfast meeting a few months ago for a bunch of executives from different companies, and that's exactly what we discussed, is, what are some ways to create an innovative culture? Because, I know there's a lab here, and innovation centers and disruptive labs are popping up all over the place, which is great. That's going to drive growth for our country, and certainly our city. But the question is, what if I'm already in a company that's existing and we're big and we want to shift our mindset, our behavior, our culture to be one that's more innovative, like a lot of these companies that are starting up now. So the first is, and a lot of companies don't like to do this, is you've got to give your employees the freedom to fail. Now, what does that failure mean? It's got to be productive, but you've got to give them the freedom to fail. Sometimes you do have to make a mistake and take 1 step back in order to move 2 steps forward. There's nothing wrong with productive failure. Now, and I'm speaking as a guy who I said has a lot of healthcare clients. So whenever I say this to them, they say, well, we can't afford to take any risks because every risk we take is catastrophic. And I said, well, that's not true. I'm not suggesting that you try new stuff on patients that's never been tested before. I'm not saying that every risk you take has to end in an adverse event for a patient. But there are areas of your organization where you can take some risk, where it's not going to have a direct impact on your patient. So start with that, right? And then worry about something bigger and broader. But it's about the mindset of giving employees the freedom to fail. It's also, which is, as you can tell, probably a theme from what I'm talking about. It's about focusing on progress and improvement, not problem resolution. So again, you focus on problem resolution, all you're doing is restoring yourself to past performance. You focus on making improvements, you focus on progress, you're always going to be moving in the right direction. An interesting one is about rewarding attitudes and behaviors, not just victories. So this ties back to the first one, which is giving employees the freedom to fail. But you actually have to reward the behavior that you're looking for. So reward people for exhibiting the right kinds of behavior, for coming up with new ideas, for challenging the status quo, for coming up with a new way of doing things. You may not implement it, you may not think it's a great idea, but you got to reward that kind of behavior, because even if 1 in 10 of those ideas is a great one, that's one idea that you wouldn't have had if you were just rewarding people for their victories and say, we're only going to acknowledge the people that come up with the best idea. So there's a couple of organizations, TATA is one of them, where they actually give out an award every year to the employee that had the best idea that wasn't implemented. They also have an award for the employee that came up with the worst idea, right? Sort of a joking award, but again, it helps reward the behavior saying, we know it was a terrible idea. You probably know it was a terrible idea, but you came forward and you told us about the idea. We looked into it, and yes, it turned out to be a bad idea, but we're rewarding your behavior for doing what we want you to do, which is come up with new ideas, new suggestions, new ways of doing things. You've got to evaluate your people on their contribution to innovative practices. So I can't think off the top of my head of one organization that I know of, certainly none of my clients do it, that actually evaluate people's performance on their contribution to innovation. So how much are you as an individual employee contributing to innovation? Are you suggesting new ideas to your manager? Are you coming up with new ways of doing things? Are you taking an indirect leadership role within your department or organization saying, guys, you know what? I think there's a better way of doing things. I don't know what it is, but every time I come and we do this, I feel like there's a better way to do it. So let's talk about it. Is there a better way that we can do this? You've got to reward those kinds of things. You've got to evaluate people's performance based on that. If you want to have a culture where people are coming up with great ideas, then you've got to evaluate them on coming up with great ideas. You've got to formally manage the innovation process, meaning you've got to have a formal way that we can identify best practices, that we gather them, we review them, we classify them. And when I say classify, meaning you're going to have some that I can just do. I can flip a switch, I can move a machine, I can change a process, I can do that immediately. I can change the behavior tomorrow. Other ones might require time, investment, resources. You've got to prioritize those and say which ones are really going to have the biggest impact for us. And there's others you're just going to say, we're not going to do anything with those because we don't think the impact is worth it. But the most successful organizations have a formal way to manage that process so that the best ideas and the ones that are going to have the most impact bubble to the surface, and those are the ones that they focus on. Because if you have too many priorities, you have no priorities. So I get a lot of clients that say to me, well, the problem is we identify 3 priorities at the beginning of the year, and then halfway through the year, somebody comes up with a great idea, and that becomes another priority. And then a month later, somebody else has a great idea, and that's another priority. So we've gone from 3 priorities to 5 or 6 or 7. And I said, well, once you're at 5 or 6 or 7, you have no priorities, because you're probably not making any progress on any of them. So what you then have to do is you have to look at this new idea and say, is it a higher or lower priority than the ones that we've already identified? If it's higher, put people on it. If it's lower, put it on the parking lot and see if there's another appropriate time to work on it. Because you can't have everything a priority or you'll never get anything done. Instead of cost cutting, we need to talk about growth. So no organization has ever cut their way to success. That's not to say that you can't be conscious of your costs. But if your only strategy is to cut costs, you will not thrive as an organization. With the rare exception of, let's say, a Walmart, where that is their target market. We are going to slash prices as low as possible because that's what our customers want, right? So there's an exception to every rule, but organizations that focus purely on cost cutting and not on growth are not going to be successful over the long term. Because if you're not growing, then you're declining. There's no middle ground. You're either growing or you're declining. Because if you could argue, say, well, we're at status quo. But everybody else isn't at status quo. So if you're not, and your organization itself is at status quo, everybody else is changing. There's some other competitor out there that's nipping at your heels. There's some other competitor out there that's trying to steal your best people. Okay? So if you're not growing, you are declining. Key I want to talk about, instead of strategy development, we've got to focus on execution. I talk to a lot of organizations that say, yeah, we're going through our strategy development process and, 6 months, 9 months from now, we're going to have our strategy nailed down. And I have to suppress a laugh. When I hear that, I say 6 to 9 months from now, that's when you're going to have your strategy complete. 6 to 9 months from now, the marketplace is going to be completely different. So whatever you come up with 6 to 9 months from now might be completely irrelevant. You're going to have to go through it again. So what I suggest to them is try and knock it off much quicker than that and then focus on the execution, right? Don't worry so much about, well, we've got to spend 6 months doing the strategy, because depending on the market, depending on the strengths of the organization, the strategy should be fairly obvious in the sense that you want to focus on a strategy that focuses on your strengths, your differentiation, your value to the marketplace, what your customers need, how you best deliver that. Those are the kinds of things strategy needs to be focused on. We need to put a lot more effort on the execution. Too many articles, too many books, too many conversations that we read and have are about, we had this great idea, we couldn't get it as far as we needed to. We have this great strategy, but we're not able to implement it. Execution, think about how many books have been written just with the title or something on execution and implementation. It's because organizations don't do it very well. That's where the focus of the resources needs to be. We've got a clear vision of where we want to be. Now let's focus our efforts on how do we implement that? How do we implement that champagne pyramid I talked about earlier to cascade that strategy all the way down so that everybody at every level of the organization knows this is what I need to do in order to help my company get where it wants to be. And the last thing I want to talk about, again, speed. Instead of moving faster, we need to talk about optimizing speed. to maximize results. So that means understanding when to speed up and when to slow down. So if you think about a train system, I'm sure you've all taken the subway system or some various train system. There's obviously stations and there's lights and indicators along the way that tell the train, or I guess automatically do it these days without the driver, that slow the train down or speed the train up. You've got to slow down. There's a train at the next station. We don't want to crash. So the indicator lights along the way say slow down or stop, right? The train is 2 stations ahead. You're falling behind. You need to speed up. Organizations need to implement those same kinds of indicators to say, when should we speed up? When should we slow down? You've got to have guidelines so people understand, when do we put the pedal to the metal? We want to be first to market. When do we slow up a little bit? Let somebody else get to market first, because we're so good at leapfrogging over them once we get there. We're going to let them make the mistakes, and then we're going to figure out how to make it better. You've got to understand as an organization when to speed up, when to slow down, because you want to obviously avoid derailments. So if you think about, again, that train analogy, there's guidelines on speed when you're going on a straightaway, when you're going on a turn. Unfortunately, last year, there were a couple of different derailments because the conductors were going around the turns too fast. Well, we've seen lots of organizations derail by going too fast when they should have been going a little bit slower. So I think you have to think about that analogy when you're talking about speed within your organization.
So my question to you would be, if you were brought in, maybe you have been brought in, to move a university forward or a piece of the university forward, then how would you apply some of these principles? Okay,
so maybe I'll ask you a question first. So you're a professor. Mm-hmm. So why do you want to teach at Rotman? Why do you like teaching at Rotman?
I don't teach at Rotman.
Okay.
I might want to, though.
So
public health.
Okay.
The School of Public Health.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's a couple of things. So first of all, I agree, and there's lots of organizations that require independence, right? So if you think of frontline sales reps in a company, they want their independence. You think of doctors in a hospital, they want their independence, mm-hmm. right? So where do you start? I think that, to me, is what I hear from your questions. Where do you start so that you align everybody on that same page? You start with a common objective. So why does that doctor work for that hospital? Why does that professor work for that university? Why does that sales rep work for that company? Right? So once you answer that question, you can start to get into those people's heads to say, if I understand why everybody works at Rotman, why everybody wants to work at Sick Kids, why everybody wants to work for 3M, that's the common objective that everybody has as an employee. So then I implement strategies that allow them to have flexibility in their roles, because I understand what they're trying to achieve. So if you said to me, I wanted, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So right there, then I think this is where we have it from. Reason is not the way I think, but the reason a member wants to be in a particular department or university is because he wants to do, she wants to do her research. Mm-hmm. Hands off, leave me alone. And not contributing, I'm overstating the case, but not mm-hmm. contributing to...
I want freedom.
Yeah, but not contributing to some high-level vision.
Right.
When they go home at night, they're not thinking of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is so difficult is to get people to identify and share a common vision. And I think the inherent values of the university are antithetical to the kinds of things you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So I would say the shortest way I think I can answer your question is, if I understand that that's what you want, then I've got to implement strategies that help you achieve that.
Yeah.
And I've got to implement strategies that help my professors, my doctors, my sales reps achieve what they want. But they also need to understand, in order for us to be able to do that for you, here's what you need to do for us, right? So if you want to have the freedom to do all the research that you want to do, we're happy to provide that to you, because then you're as productive and you're doing all the things that we want, because we want to be associated with somebody who's coming up with leading edge research and all that. But in order for us to do that, in order for us to have the resources to be able to give you that freedom, here's what we need back. Here's what we need in return, right? We need you to put the Rotman logo on your papers, or, so it doesn't have to be, you need to do these things and here's the policies you have to follow. It's finding that common objective and saying, if you want the continue, which we want you to continue, here's the back and forth that we need. Here's the strategies that we need to have. Here's how we all get in that common direction. Because if you think about it at the highest level, whether it's Rotman or other school or a hospital, you say, we want this organization to be viewed in the best possible light. So how do you do that? You do that by providing great research. We do that by these three things. Other people do that by these three things. So again, it's not that everybody has to do the same thing. It's that you're all moving in the same direction, which is we want this organization to have the greatest reputation around the world. Let's just say that was the goal, right? So what can you do to do that? What can I do to do that? What can Steve do to do that? It's all going to be different. So I would engage it saying what's in your best interest.
Ours is a little bit different. We work in broadcasting, so it's probably very different to most of the businesses that you're used to. And I'm head of brands, so one of the things I find is hard is alignment within the company to get the vision to go forward in a really uniquely powerful way. For example, some of us we all have conflicting views of who our customer is. For me, it's viewers. For our sales team, it's advertisers. For our upper management, it's shareholder value. So how do you, when it's so, people are so, and we're excellent on all different levels, but when you put the whole lot together, we're not always singing the same song, and we're certainly always not trying for the same quality of excellence or vision for excellence. How do you go about getting alignment like that? I mean, maybe that's too big a question for somebody today, but I think that's a huge part of this. I mean, you'll see sections, and probably everyone can, adapt or talk about the fact that everyone looks for a higher level, great value and great vision, but it's the bringing everyone on aligning big companies that often snookers you completely.
Yeah.
That's to me, that's a huge.
So
over that, I think you can achieve all of your excellence that you're.
So I guess my first question, which you don't necessarily have to answer, is why do you think you need to bring everybody together on the common vision? Right? Aside from the common vision is we want to be the #1 broadcasting company in the world, right? Which everybody can agree on. I guess where I start with, if you were a client, I said, where I'd start with you is, do you think that there's value in doing that? Because if you've got 3 different areas of the company, all have different customers, right? I would still say to you, there are things that one area is doing with their customers that other areas could apply with their own customers. It doesn't have to be the same script or the same process, but there's things that somebody's doing over here that would work with the other 2 areas as well. So how do you apply that?
It is talking about the excellence and the vision.
And so that's how you do it, is not to look at it as silos, to just agree that we've got 3 different sets of customers. What are you doing with your customers that's working? How can we apply that with our customers? So how can you apply what you're doing in another area that's focused on advertisers, right? It doesn't mean that, like I said, the conversation doesn't have to be the same. The script, the process, the policy, it's not about that. It's about saying, we want to find out what's going well in this organization and how do we apply it and replicate it in other areas. That, to me, is the biggest question to think about if you're really talking about operational excellence, is how do we replicate success in other areas to our own benefit? Doesn't mean, and again, I think that's, just to jump on a bit, and I see your hand, just to jump on back to what I said, I think that's the difference between a mindset and a methodology. If you're thinking with a methodology mindset, you say, well, I've got to pick up this whole process and I've got to move it over here. And I'm saying, no, you don't. Somebody over here in your organization is doing something really well over here. How can you take it and get other areas of the organization to that same level? It's not about picking up a methodology or a process or a policy, saying, what are they doing and how can we apply that to us? So maybe just let me ask you a couple of questions to better understand the scenario. So when these nurses, physicians graduate, do they have to become members?
They do, because
right. They don't have a choice.
Yeah,
right.
They don't have a choice.
So you're a monopoly.
Exactly.
Right. So the question I would be asking is, what if tomorrow we weren't a monopoly? What if tomorrow the government or somebody said, we're going to create a second organization like yours? Because there's no competition, we're forcing people to do it, and physicians are saying to us, we'd like a little bit of choice here and there. So that's the question I would be posing to your CEO, is what happened if a new organization popped up tomorrow? How would you be protected to keep your members if they then had a choice? Because, I mean, the situation you're in is no different than what, you know, if you think of Bell or any of the, like 30, 40 years ago, was a monopoly. So they operated in a certain way, like a monopoly. And then all of a sudden, we opened up the competition, and they're still very competitive, but they're nowhere close to a monopoly anymore. So there's lots of precedents for that kind of situation. I think I've got time for one more question. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Anyone have one more thought or question they want to share? Okay. So I just want to tell you briefly what I think is next. Because we talked about sort of the progression to get to operational excellence. And that was, you know, logistics and manufacturing and supply chain, and that's now become operational excellence. So obviously there's a growing awareness that however we define this term operational excellence, it's becoming more important. Like I said, companies are starting to hire roles, directors, VPs, senior executives of operational excellence. So what's next? My view is what's next is we now start tying operational improvements to profitability. So it isn't about efficiency. It isn't about productivity. It's about how do these operational improvements, how does this excellence that we're implementing tie directly to our top or our bottom line? And so even for not-for-profits. So I'm not just talking about in the for-profit world, right? And that's why I say, how does it tie to your top or your bottom line or your cost structure? So this is sort of a bit of a preview of my next book. But it's a concept that I call true profit, which is how do you tie a lot of this mindset change, this excellence that you're now going to go after? How do you tie that to outcomes and results? Now, a lot of times that's going to be financial, but it doesn't have to be. But how do you tie that to results? And I think that's the part that we're still missing in a lot of these conversations is tying operational excellence to hard results that we can measure. And I think that's what's next, in my view, of operational excellence. It's now not just about streamlining processes and improving policies and retaining employees. It's about what's the impact of those changes that we're making? What's the impact of creating a more innovative culture? What's the impact of getting our three divisions aligned? What's the financial and non-financial impact of doing that? So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for being here this morning. And I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if anybody has anything else they want to talk about.
Thank you very much.
For more information, visit www.acmconsulting.ca.